Where is our photographer? The words tore out of me before I could stop myself. The band stumbled mid-song. Guests exchanged confused glances, some even stopped clapping, and for a moment the entire hall froze in silence. I stood there in my white dress, bouquet trembling in my hands, and felt the ground slip away beneath me. This was supposed to be the day I had dreamed about for years. A day meant to be remembered forever. But there was no one there to capture those memories. We had prepared for this wedding for months. I chose the dress, the flowers, rehearsed the first dance. But above all else, we hired a photographer. Not just someone with a camera, but a professional with a portfolio full of glowing reviews. We paid him $4,500 and signed a contract. He promised to be with us from early morning until late at night. Getting ready shots, the ceremony, the reception, the little details, everything woven into a perfect story. On the morning of the wedding, I expected him to arrive first at the hotel where my bridesmaids and I were getting ready. I kept glancing at the door while my makeup was done, nerves tightening in my chest. Hours passed. No knock. No call. I texted, "Good morning, are you on your way?" No reply. I dialed his number, phone switched off. Probably traffic, I told myself. But the knot of worry had already settled under my ribs. By midday, when we arrived at the venue, there was still no sign of him. We lined up at the arch, the musicians began their song, guests stood, clapping and even crying with joy. Everything looked perfect, except for one glaring absence. No professional camera. Just guests fumbling with shaky hands, flashes flickering on and off. I whipped around, and the empty space where the photographer should have stood punched me in the gut. That's when it came out. Where is our photographer? My groom looked at me, bewildered. The best man shrugged. My mother in the front row went pale. Someone whispered, "Maybe he's just late?" Another guest said, "Call him again." But every call went straight to voicemail. I forced myself to smile through the ceremony, but my heart hammered like a drum. Instead of joy, I felt despair creeping in. I imagined the photos we had envisioned. Me walking down the aisle, his trembling hands as he slipped on the ring, our parents wiping away tears. Those moments were supposed to live forever. And they were slipping away, uncaptured. Friends tried to save the day. One bridesmaid snapped photos on her phone, but her hands shook. A friend of a guest pulled out an old DSLR, but without a flash, half the shots came out dark and blurred. Guests scurried around trying to help, but it all looked like a sad parody of what we'd been promised. Every time we gathered for group shots, the void was unbearable. Where the professional should have been, nothing but guests holding up phones. And each click felt like mockery. I glanced at my groom. He squeezed my hand, trying to reassure me with a smile, but I saw the frustration in his eyes. We both knew these memories would never come again. There was no second chance. Anger bubbled up, mingled with helplessness. My thoughts spiraled. We trusted him with our most important day. We believed him. We paid him. And he disappeared. I pictured us telling our children about our wedding. What would we show them? Blurry selfies? Grainy clips filmed from the back row? The celebration marched on, but for me it turned into torment. The music played. Guests laughed and danced, but all I could see was the gaping hole where the photographer should have been. And with every passing hour, one truth became clearer. He wasn't running late. He was never coming. The wedding carried on, but I felt detached, as if I were watching everything through foggy glass. The music was loud, guests laughed, glasses clinked, toasts rose in the air. But for me, each moment rang hollow. I knew none of it would be preserved the way we dreamed. Instead of joy, a heavy weight of betrayal pressed on my chest. My thoughts circled endlessly. We trusted him with our most important day. We paid. We believed. And he simply abandoned us. When night fell and the string lights were switched on, the dancing began. Guests tried to keep the mood alive, but I noticed how many of them put their phones away. Batteries were dying, storage was full, and the photos trickled off. I kept smiling for the sake of appearances, but inside I was trembling. My dreams of a wedding album, of photographs I could show our children and grandchildren, dissolved into nothing. By the end of the night I could barely stand. My husband squeezed my hand, trying to anchor me, but I saw the same storm brewing in his eyes. We hardly spoke, just exchanged glances full of anger, disappointment and helplessness. That night I couldn't sleep. I scrolled through the fragments of photos guests had managed to take. Blurred figures, cropped heads, a flash bouncing in a mirror. Instead of tears of joy, I wept with despair. I sat on the bed still in my wedding dress, unable to take it off, staring at my phone. I had dreamed of beautiful portraits, of the moment he slipped on the ring, of a shot of our parents hugging through tears. Those photos would never exist. The next morning we tried calling again. And suddenly ringing. My heart leapt. I pressed the phone to my ear, bracing for an apology, an explanation, anything. "Yeah, I'm here," came a flat, indifferent voice. "Where were you?" I shouted. "We had our wedding yesterday. You were supposed to be there." A pause. Then lazily. "I was sick. Couldn't make it." I froze. "Sick? You didn't even warn us. You didn't send a replacement." "What would that have changed?" he replied, irritated. "My camera's acting up anyway. I had a fever. Nothing would have worked." I was speechless. Not a single apology. No sense of responsibility. My husband ripped the phone from my hands. "We paid you $4,500. You owe us a refund." The photographer chuckled. "The deposit's non-refundable. It's in the contract." The blood pounded in my temples. Non-refundable deposit. He hadn't even shown up, and now he hid behind a single line of fine print. We pulled out the contract and read it again. Yes, it said non-refundable deposit, but only if the client canceled. Nothing about him simply not showing up. We gathered everything. The text messages where he confirmed all-day coverage, the payment receipts, the booking confirmations. Each screenshot, each document felt like a weapon. I stacked them neatly in a folder, feeling my despair slowly transform into something else. Determination. Over the next few days I told friends and acquaintances what had happened. Almost everyone said the same thing. Go to court. Some advised filing complaints, others mentioned small claims court. The amount fit the limit perfectly, and the case was clear. Late at night I sat at my laptop, reading stories from others who had been cheated. A woman wrote about paying for a videographer who never delivered. Another couple described how their DJ left halfway through the reception. Some people won, others lost, but every single one of them had something in common. They fought back. And that's when I told myself, we're going to fight too. He doesn't get to erase our memories and walk away unpunished. We'll see this through to the end. After that call with the photographer, I walked around for days as if trapped under a heavy bell. His words, "The deposit is non-refundable," echoed like a sentence. It felt like we had lost not just our photos, but our money and our sense of justice. My husband tried to soothe me. "We'll keep the memories in our hearts." But I couldn't accept it. Memories fade, and $4,500 was far too steep a price for nothing. We started small. One evening we sat down at the kitchen table and wrote a demand letter. What had happened, when, the losses we suffered, and what we demanded. We attached copies of the contract, the payments, even the unanswered messages I had sent him. We mailed it both by email and certified post. His reply was blunt. Force majeure. Illness. No refunds. No doctor's note. No proof. Just a piece of paper. That's when we realized. The only path left was court. Gathering the folder became almost therapeutic. I carefully placed every detail inside. The signed contract, bank transfers, text conversations, a list of guests who could testify. We even created a timeline of that day, 8:10 a.m. He didn't show at the hotel 12:30, no response 4 o'clock, ceremony without photographer 11:40 p.m. Phone still off morning, his "I was sick" excuse. At the end we listed the damages, the full payment, court fees, postage costs. By the time we closed the folder our decision was solid. We would go to small claims court. At the clerk's office it turned out to be simpler than I imagined. A woman behind the glass slid a form toward us and said, "Fill this out. Who you are, who the defendant is, how much you're asking and why." We sat in the hallway, writing it out, and with every line I felt control coming back to me. "Under what happened?" I wrote. "Photographer failed to appear at wedding. Service not provided. Refund refused." We attached copies, paid the fee, and walked out with a case number in our hands. The hearing was set 3 weeks later. During those weeks I practiced. By day I worked, by night I stood in front of the mirror rehearsing. We paid, he didn't show, he has no proof. My husband sat nearby reminding me, facts first, feelings after. I printed 3 copies of every piece of evidence and numbered them. On the day of court, for the first time in weeks, I felt clarity instead of fear. The courtroom was full of small tragedies. A tenant fighting a landlord, someone arguing with a store. Each story mattered to someone. Ours was just one of many. The photographer arrived late. He sat across from us, scrolling on his phone, pretending to be bored. The judge opened the case and asked me to speak first. I stood and told everything. Our dreams, the contract, the payment, his disappearance. I handed over the folder. The contract, receipts, text messages, demand letter, timeline. The judge flipped through silently. Defendant, your response? The photographer stood. I was sick. I had a fever. My camera broke. It was force majeure. Do you have a medical note? Asked the judge. No. Repair documents from a service center? No. Did you arrange a replacement? He shrugged. I didn't have time. The judge studied him, then the papers again. The contract states non-refundable deposit, but only if the client cancels. In this case, the service was not provided. The contractor failed to appear. There is no evidence of valid force majeure. The courtroom grew quiet. You could hear someone rustling papers on the next bench. The judge removed his glasses, looked at us, and said, "The court orders the defendant to return $4,500 for the unrendered service, plus court costs." The photographer lowered his head. His arrogance evaporated, leaving only frustration. For the first time in weeks, I felt a weight lift off my chest. We hadn't recovered the photographs, but we had recovered justice. Outside, I breathed in the cold air and realized, if someone had told me on my wedding day that this would end in court, I wouldn't have believed them. But it was court that gave us back our sense that we weren't powerless. And if you ever face something like this, know that it's not as terrifying as it seems. The key is to collect your evidence, document every step, and not be afraid to fill out the forms. Court isn't some faceless machine, it's a tool. It can be slow, it can be formal, but it works. We may never have the wedding photos I dreamed of, but I hold on to one image in my mind. My husband and I walking out of that courthouse hand in hand, smiling. Because this time we won.